Yo, what's good everybody? It's Sketch and welcome back to the channel. And on today's episode we're going to do something a little bit different than usual. Because if you've been following this channel for a little while, you may notice that I have done a review on Strider 2 once already, but this was a long time ago. And we got some better equipment and a little bit more knowledge than we had in that first time around. So I figured, hey, let's do it again. So on today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at Strider 2, developed by Capcom for the arcade in 1999 and receiving a port to the PlayStation 1 in summer of 2000. Our homie Strider Hero is officially back for his second mission with an upgraded art style and a juiced up level of action and visuals. This isn't much of a departure from the 1989 classic, but more like an update of sorts, since you'll see some familiar faces and locations in this 2.5D cypher slashing adventure. Now let's catch up on the story and briefly discuss the timeline and how this technically is the fourth appearance of Strider Hero. 2,000 years after the defeat of Grandmaster Mayo, he has returned to continue his plot for world domination. The future under his rule has led to overpopulation and global food shortage. Mass pollution and environmental destruction have created new diseases and mutations. Corporations become evil organizations while crime runs rampant. A new Strider, carrying the same code name as Hiro, appears ready to slash through the opposition like big box shops slash through prices. He's sent in by the Strider organization as the reincarnated clone of Hiro to once again banish the Grandmaster to the Shadow Realm. The Strider series has a fairly interesting timeline considering the original games released in the arcade and the NES almost simultaneously back in 1989, but are two very different games. The arcade coin-op is a breakneck pace action platformer where you first encounter Grandmaster Mayo in Eurasia, while the NES version is more of an action adventure with a larger emphasis on exploration to gather clues and items to progress the narrative, which follows closer to the source material from its manga series. Before the official Strider 2 released in the arcade in 1999, British publisher US Gold released a sequel also by the name of Strider 2, also known as Journey from Darkness: Strider Returns, which they licensed from Capcom. Developed for various microcomputers in 1990 and eventually receiving a port to the Sega Genesis in 1992, programmed by Tiertex. While it technically had a more powerful cartridge than the original, containing numerous voice samples through its runtime, though its gameplay is significantly more choppy and floaty feeling than its predecessor, and graphically also looked inferior. While not a horrible game, it's widely regarded as the worst entry in the franchise, and even to this day, Capcom rarely acknowledges this entry as canon to the series. Now that we've got all that out of the way, let's talk about the official Strider 2 entry from 1999. Gameplay-wise, you've got another breakneck-paced action platformer that's a 2.5D affair this time around. You'll run through 5 stages similar to the original arcade game, though there are a few new abilities available this time, like a double jump and a boost attack, which throws projectile ciphers across the screen and provides a temporary damage buff that puts in work on whatever is in your path. Stages are broken up into 3 to 4 sections, most with a sub-boss encounter at the end before transitioning to the next phase. If you're familiar with the first arcade game, the control is equally as tight and the movement feels solid while clinging to walls and doing triangle jumps with relative ease. The platforming is on a similar level as the original as far as the speed and pacing, and even has a few reimagined sections from Strider 1 which appear in the sequel, which are awesome nods to the original. Boss fights are all pretty fun and balanced, but there are a few of them that have stage hazards like pits and electrified arenas which dial the difficulty up a notch at times. Though there's no credit limitations and you can replay the game infinitely until you figure out the more difficult sections, so it's very forgiving compared to the Strider 1. Graphics wise, we've got a 2.5D game, this time with 2D hand-drawn sprites on 3D backgrounds, running on the Sony ZN2 arcade board. It's graphically pretty sick to look at with the sprite work and animation on the characters and environments. Backgrounds usually have a lot of moving parts and scaling effects as you traverse through the game's 5 stages. The hand-drawn cutscenes between stages are also pretty dope here, even with them being static images with caption text. Seeing the new renditions of Legacy and newly introduced characters look pretty sick here. You'll run through several different locations, a few of which you may remember from the original Strider, and it's dope seeing some familiar locales reworked in a 3D perspective. The jungle and base of the Grandmaster sections don't return, but nearly every other section from Strider 1 does in some capacity, as well as a few of the same bosses. The bosses here are all over the shop, and some being hand-drawn and others being mostly polygon-based. These encounters are fairly interesting with how the size and scaling in action looks, and again, it's not bad. A couple of the bosses bosses are massive, and a few familiar faces crop up here too. The gravity core also gets a nice rework here, and it's pretty tight overall. Sound wise, this is also pretty sick with CD quality sound. The background music bangs here and has a variety of vibes throughout the game. The sound effects work itself is also pretty good with some light voice synth and weighty impact of the cipher and explosions. Fully from the grappling hook hitting the wall to the impact of jumping, sound pretty good here. The sound department is solid all around, to be fair, on this entry. Overall, Strider 2 is an awesome revival of the series that nearly for a decade lay dormant, at least in the eyes of Capcom. And the return of Strider Hero, while maybe not quite as difficult as the first entry, is a welcome one with fast gameplay and really fun, albeit short campaign once you get comfortable with everything. It's got some bonus content, being the original arcade game, and once you've cleared Strider 2, you can unlock Strider Heian as a playable character. This and the later 2014 Strider are both games that are absolutely worth checking out. Strider 2 gets an 8.5 out of 10 and comes highly recommended to fans of the series as well as action platform games. It's crept up a little bit in price over the years for a complete version, so play this one however you can. It's available on the PlayStation 1 and is also on the PlayStation Network. And again, I thank you for checking out this video. If you find these videos helpful, that's awesome. I'm glad you can use it as a resource. Check back often. We'll have more reviews and video commentaries coming up in the near future. But until then, stay safe out there, take it easy. I'll see you on the next one.